Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. What a day it was. What a day indeed, as the president points out that, in his view, Russia has already begun the invasion of Ukraine. And look, this was something we knew was probably going to come. It's something that's been predicted for a while, and the story's coming out today. The more democracy and diplomacy and the more discussion around, those terms, the harsher Putin got. And I guess, are we surprised? No, not at all. Not even a little bit. And as I said, the White House, called it, said it is what it is. The president said Russia just announced that it's carving out a big chunk of Ukraine. He is setting up a rationale to take more territory by force. In my view, he says this is the beginning of a Russian invasion of Ukraine. And immediately the Republicans come out, whoa. It's an important distinction, they said, as an invasion would trigger sanctions on Russia and imperil diplomatic meetings that were set on the condition that Russia not invade Ukraine. Well, we're moving forward on those. The diplomatic sessions have been halted for now, which is why I find it interesting where we are in this moment. Immediately, Germany came out and said we're going to stop them opening up the Nord Stream 2 pipeline that would allow Russia to bypass the Ukraine. Canada announced they were going to be sending troops to make sure that NATO and all of us are moving in one direction. Even Lithuania jumped into it. The Lithuanian prime minister tweeted out, Putin just put Kafka and Orwell to shame. No limits to dictator's imagination. No lows too low. No lies too blatant. No red lines too red to cross. Now, Putin had his defenders. That's going to happen. He likes to, he's a dictator. Dictators like that. The president of Nicaragua, Daniel Ortega, he was one of the first world leaders to come out and say that he was backing Putin, saying that Putin was right to recognize two regions controlled by Moscow-backed separatists as independent. He was right. He was right at declaring that they're independent. He was right all along that. Syria jumps into it. Syria suggested the decision of the ally Russia to recognize two breakaway regions, as well as reported by the AP and Reuters. Cuba even jumped in. Cuba said, the U.S. should stop this historical propaganda against Putin. Even our own former president, the 45th president of the United States, called Vladimir Putin a genius and very savvy. He did some right-wing radio show, some podcast that, oddly enough, in the slot that Rush Limbaugh destroyed America in, they're going even further because look, now it's out of the bag. The Republicans are the party of Russia and Putin, and if you haven't come out yet and said this is an abomination, that this is flat wrong. If you're a Republican voter, if you're a Republican politician, and you haven't already come out on the side of us, you're with them. That simple. Now, Trump went on his ramblings about how, the election was rigged and how, the wrong candidates in the White House. And, had I won, because I did, it was rigged, it was stolen from me. This would have never happened, except, nobody forgets Helsinki. Nobody forgets that Trump has been Putin's lapdog for a very long time. And I got to tell you, this statement makes me believe that the P-tape is real. I don't think you have a former president come out in this kind of support of authoritarian dictators taking over a democratically elected government. I don't think you do that unless there's something out there. But saying that what Putin is doing is genius, he's savvy for doing it, and here's the part: He goes, Putin's now saying it's independent, a large section of Ukraine. I said, how smart is that? And he's going to go in and be a peacekeeper. Yeah, he's going to be a peacekeeper. That's strongest peace force. Going to have all these tanks. He says we could use more of that on our southern border. That's the strongest peace force I've ever seen. There were more army tanks I've ever seen. Now remember, this is the guy who just loves the parades and the show of force and all of the things that Putin has done in the past. Loves it. It's who he is. It's who he, look, if Trump looks up to anybody, it's Putin. It's that simple for me. And now going into this nonsense of, if I were president, no one would ever do that. Nonsense. And here's the thing. I oppose what Putin is doing and Putin just for the exact same reasons that I was opposed to Donald Trump. These people don't care about you, about me. They care about power. This idea that, and look, Putin's been clear about this over the years. He's angry that the Cold War ended the way it did. He's angry about all of the stuff, the breakup of Mother Russia. Even though he denies, no, I'm not trying to get the old band back together. Yes, he is. But here's the one thing that's interesting to me, and you're watching it happen across the Republican Party here. This idea of blind loyalty. It's something that Putin absolutely has to have. It's something that Trump has to. It's what all dictators need. Blind loyalty. It's always been the currency of strongmen. Not competence, not knowledge, certainly not hard work. But blind loyalty. Complete, total, absolute loyalty. And I guess, look, every time something like this happens, I go, oh my gosh, I can't believe it happened. Because here's how this went down today. I was talking with my producer today. We were going on about he's asking me, well, what do you think? I said, this is now the coming out. This is the Republicans saying, all of that jingoism, all that false patriotism, that's out the window. This is about blind ideology, blind faith to an ideology that this country has nothing to do with. It's about power. And I said, you may remember, back during the last election, you had those idiots running around with the "I'd rather be Russian than a Democrat" T-shirt. And as we were talking, he was, my producer's trying to allay my fears that isn't the entire Republican Party. And I believe it's the majority of the Republican Party. But he's telling me, no, you just live in a bubble. You were surrounded by crazy people. Not everyone is like that. The reason you remember that shirt is because, everyone was so outraged by it. Not more than 5 minutes later, Trump comes out with that statement. Not more than 5 minutes later, and I go, where are the Republicans to do anything now? Mike Pompeo, who wants to be president, spent $30,000 on a makeover so he could be more media able. He's on Russian state television praising Putin. This guy wants to be our next president on Russian state television saying, no, what a Joe, he's fabulous. We love Putin. And I didn't hear the outrage from the blathering class. I didn't hear the chaos machine on the radio today condemning Trump's statements. No, they were all on board. Oh my gosh. And the thing is I know I shouldn't be, but I kind of still am a little surprised by the lack of response by the apologists, the lapdogs, the blind loyalists, the chaos merchants. Because I guess I should not be surprised, because understand, greed is their game. It's all they know, greed. They don't care about consequences. They don't care what happens globally. They don't care about any of the messages being sent. They care about winning and scoring their political points. My team won. Without thinking about what this means. Because I don't know if you know it yet, welcome to the new Cold War. And for those of us who lived through the last one, it wasn't great. I remember the fall. Here's where I'm struggling. What happened to the GOP? What happened to Reagan's party? What happened to Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall? How did we get from Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall, to Vladimir Putin is savvy and a genius? How do you get there? You get there because ideologically they're the same. It's all about greed. It's about power. It's about money. And in the end, working class people in Russia, working class people in the Ukraine, and working class people here in the U.S. are going to suffer. We're going to put crippling sanctions on Russia. Do you think that's going to cripple the oligarchs who have incredible amounts of money? Of course not. It's going to flow downward, like pain and misery always does. To who? To the working poor. And what's going to happen is what difference is it that you're a capitalist system or a communist system when the working class is still struggling? We used to joke when I was a kid that they would wait in line for hours to get toilet paper because their production was so off because they were building military armaments. They were spending all of their money on guns and not butter. Well, get ready for that. And for those of you who are around my age and who remember 1989, like I do, I remember this may jog a memory. Do you remember the idea of a peace dividend? Do you remember them talking about, well, now that communism has fallen and democracy has flourished and it's the end of the Cold War, we can take all those trillions of dollars. Reagan spent $1 trillion on Star Wars. We can take all that money we've spent for decades and we can now invest it in making humanity possible, aspiring for the best, changing the world and pursuing democracy and pursuing the better life. Walking up Maslow's hierarchy of need to self-actualization, to maybe all children will go to bed with their bellies full. Everyone who needs health care will get it. Educational opportunities for everyone. Workers will have jobs that will support themselves. It was going to be great because we won. We won. Where'd the peace dividend go? Anybody want to tell me where the peace dividend went? All those billions of dollars that we weren't supposed to be spending on the military-industrial complex? Remember that? Because it was over. We didn't need to be building another gazillion nuclear warheads. We didn't need another gazillion tanks. Yet here we are. Get ready. The new Cold War. And what's frustrating to me is we had a moment. We had an opportunity. And Republicans and neoliberal Democrats screwed it up. We gave that peace dividend away. And who'd we give it to? Well, we created the largest billionaire class in the history of civilization. Does that count for anything? We created an American oligarchy. We created corporate power that replaced the power of governments. This is where we're at in this moment. And what you have is a Republican Party virtually devoid of a soul. Because right now there are people, and I just spent a little time on the Truth Social. I did this so you don't have to. Please don't. It's full of, it is a failure from top to bottom, but it is where all of the craziest went. And all you see is attacks on Joe Biden. Now, I've said from the beginning, it's my belief that a lot of this is because Joe Biden is president. And that's going to be music to the ears of all the maggots and all the Trump supporters. He said it. He said what we already knew. It's all Joe Biden's fault. Nope. This happened because we're a divided country. When you look at us from across anywhere, you see a divide. In this moment, we used to come together and our divides disappeared when there was a threat from abroad. Not now. I'm watching all of the talking heads on the right. I'm watching the influencers on the right. I'm watching the media people on the right defending Trump, defending Putin, or dismissing the whole thing. and then attacking our commander-in-chief in this moment. What message does that send abroad? It is a dangerous message. And one that I truly believe Republicans are all on board with. It's angering, it's frustrating, but it's where we are. Although I would love to hear your thoughts. Whatever happened to the peace dividend? Are we on the right side of this? Should we, as J.D. Vance said, the senatorial, I shouldn't call that a Senate candidate in Ohio. He's probably out of it already. But he doesn't care. Doesn't care about it at all. Let Putin get the old gang back together. I'm curious your thoughts. 1-866-416-RICK. 1-866-416-7425. Going to take a quick break. Right back on the other side. Stick around. If you're a fan of the show, you've heard our labor history in 2 segments, and you can hear them on the radio pretty much anywhere in the U.S. Labor history has never been more important than it is right now. So here's what we'd like you to do. Tell a teacher. Tell a teacher that labor history is important and that they can get digestible 2-minute lessons that are absolutely free. Free to download, free to use, free to share. Tell a teacher to go to thericksmithshow.com/history and help us put labor back where it belongs, in the classroom. You know, generations of American workers fought, bled, and died to build the American way of life. It's our job to keep their stories alive. Go tell a teacher that we're here to help them do just that. Find us at thericksmithshow.com/history today.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So Morning Consult has a new poll out. They say that 65% of rural voters view the Democratic Party unfavorably, including 48% who strongly view the Democrats as unfavorable. And look, it's because, and I've been saying this for the longest time, it's because Democrats don't talk to rural communities. They don't. They don't compete on talk radio, which is where a lot of this comes from. They don't compete on cable news. They don't run candidates in those areas. They don't fund them at all. They've abandoned rural communities. And this is what you get. And the reality is rural communities is where the fight is, because they're getting screwed just as bad as everybody else. Understand, there are poor people in rural America, lots of them. In fact, I would argue a larger percentage than you see in most cities, but that doesn't get the mainstream media attention. And look, since no one's helping them economically, the hate stuff works. The jingoism works. The waving the flag thing, even though the people waving it don't believe it, that works. And, I've been saying for a while, the Republicans don't have a platform. They have nothing. They have no ideology. They have nothing. They offer nothing. Well, that's not true as of today, because Florida Senator Rick Scott, he has come out with his 31-page, 11-point agenda for the Republican Party, because he says it's important to tell people, tell them what you're going to do. Outside of the fact that he's going to raise taxes on 100 million people, working poor people, because you don't think you're going to raise it on rich people, do you? Of course not. But he's got an 11-point plan. I thought some of it was interesting. His number one issue is he says our kids are going to say the Pledge of the Allegiance. They're going to salute the flag, and they're going to learn that America is great. And then they're going to get school choice, so that we can put them into ideologically driven schools, so that we conform to that little ideology. And oh, by the way, as a part of this, none of that race thing that's critical about theory or whatever. None of that. His number 2 point, government will never ask American citizens to disclose their race, ethnicity, skin color, or anything on a government form. Because why? Oh, so we have no idea how those policies are actually either benefiting or harming certain segments of the population. Why would we want data to be able to see that? Yeah. His number 3 part is the soft on crime days of coddling criminal behavior will end. We will refund and respect the police because they, not the criminals, are the good guys. Yeah, this is that. We love the police. And look, I love the police too. Support them when they're not wrong. And this is the argument that Democrats should have been going on from the beginning. This kind of interesting perspective, though, I didn't see on January 6th. Just kind of throwing it out there. Number 4, he wants to secure the border, finish building the wall, and name it after Donald Trump. Yeah, okay. Number 5, we're going to grow the U.S. economy, starve Washington's economy, and stop socialism. You know, just like we did when we took that $250 from every kid in the country to make sure that, almost 4 million kids went back into poverty. Is that the kind of thing you're talking about? Shrink government, drag in the bathtub so you can drown it, and then take those programs and move them local so you can have more local thieves, like you did with block granting? You mean that? Oh, okay. I think I'm getting the gist of these plans. Number 6, we will eliminate all federal programs that can be done locally and enact term limits on federal bureaucrats. Okay. Yeah, we're gonna rob and steal, plunge, and then get rid of people who might actually know what's going on. Number 7, we will protect the integrity of American democracy and stop left-wing efforts to rig elections. Do I need to go into that one? I mean, that's one of those projection that, hey, that's our job to do. It's our job to steal and rig elections. How dare you try and let people vote? The 8th plan was we will protect, defend, and promote the American family at all costs, except hungry ones. Can't help the hungry ones. He goes on to say the nuclear family is crucial to civilization. It is God's design for humanity, and it must be protected and celebrated. To say otherwise is to deny science. I didn't write this. The jokes write themselves. Tip your waitress. Number 9, men are men, women are women, unborn babies are babies. This is basically Jesus guns babies. There's that. We are Americans, not globalists. Americans will not depend on no other nation. And basically job things that they don't really believe in. And the final one, Americans will be free. This is my favorite. Americans will be free to welcome God into all aspects of our lives, and we will stop all government efforts to deny our religious freedom and freedom of speech. Because the Democrat Party and their big tech allies are not merely secular, they have virtually created a new religion of wokeness that is increasingly hostile to people of faith. Which God are we talking about? Maybe we could clarify that a little bit. Which religious laws are we talking about? Remember, I seem to remember something about Sharia law you weren't fond of. We were going to outlaw that. Yeah. Welcome to America. Rick Scott style. Actually mind blown. But that's the agenda. That's the agenda. Gonna take a quick break. If you're just joining us and you want to download the podcast, you get that at thericksmithshow.com or wherever you get your podcasts. Quick break. Right back. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 2004. That was the day Secretary of Education Rod Page stated that he considered the National Education Association to be a terrorist organization. He made the remarks during a meeting with governors who were visiting the White House. His apology a few hours later was just as inflammatory. There he expressed his frustration at the, quote, obstructionist scare tactics the NEA's Washington lobbyists have employed against No Child Left Behind's historic reforms. Representing almost 3 million educators, the NEA had been fighting many aspects of the No Child Left Behind Act passed by Congress in 2001. The teachers' unions had initially supported the measure, but they came to realize that the act was designed to undermine public education in favor of charter, private, and religious schools. No Child Left Behind mandated regular standardized testing of students. It also threatened financial penalties and school closures. Governors on board with the goals of the act soon grew frustrated. The Bush administration reneged on federal funding necessary for its implementation. The union movement was outraged at Page's smear. John Sweeney, then president of the AFL-CIO, said, quote, "The Bush administration would like to label all those who disagree with it as terrorists in order to cover up its policies, which are harmful to working families and to divert attention from its inability to create good jobs." By 2015, the No Child Left Behind Act had received so much criticism from every corner that the Every Student Succeeds Act replaced it. This act retains Common Core standards but transfers school accountability to the states. It is now pending review under President Donald Trump's Regulatory Freeze Directive. In 2017, it was pending review under President Donald Trump's Regulatory Freeze Directive.
Can antibiotic medicines, long hailed as miracle drugs, be too much of a good thing? Yes. Two factors are at work here. First, bacteria, one of the earliest forms of life on Earth, are miracles in their own right, with a stunning ability to outsmart the antibiotic drugs through rapid evolution. Second is the rather dull inclination of us supposedly superior humans to overuse and misuse antibiotic medicines. Every time we take an antibiotic to kill some bad bacteria that is infecting our bodies, a few of the infectious germs are naturally resistant to the drug. So they survive, multiply, and become a colony of superbugs that antibiotics can't touch. Multiply this colony by the jillions of doses prescribed for everything from deadly staph infections to the common cold, and we get the, quote, antibiotic paradox. The more we use them, the less effective they become, for they're creating a spreading epidemic of immune superbugs. A big cause of this is the push by drug companies to get patients and doctors to reach for antibiotics as a cure-all. For example, millions of doses a year are prescribed for children and adults who have common colds, flu, sore throats, etc. Nearly all of these infections are caused by viruses, which cannot be cured with antibiotics. Taking an antibiotic for a cold is as useless as taking a heart drug for heartburn. The antibiotics will do nothing for your cold, but it will help establish drug-resistant superbugs in your body. That's not a smart trade-off. This is Jim Hightower saying, in fact, it's incomprehensibly stupid. Antibiotics are invaluable medicines we need for serious, life-threatening illnesses, but squandering them on sore throats has already brought us to the brink of superbugs that are resistant to everything. That's the nightmare of all nightmares.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So our quote of the day comes from Pennsylvania Senator Bob Casey, who says we're in an economic war. He says, I think it requires that we examine some issues that maybe 10 or 15 years ago we didn't have to worry about. I see, here's the problem, Bob. I love Bob Casey. I've done work for him, for his campaigns. I love the guy. But there were those of us who 10, 15 years ago were saying, yeah, we should be examining them now because we were worried about where we are today. But hey, better late than never, because we've got to be moving in a direction, and manufacturing, bringing back to our shores, especially with today's news, is something I think is really important. That's why I've asked Scott Paul to come talk with us. Scott is the president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing. AmericanManufacturing.org is their website. Scott, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, Rick, it is great to be with you as always.
So I'm looking at this moment, and, we've been talking about supply chains and making sure that, we can get chips for our cars, and we can get, eye makeup for my daughter, and we can just fill the shelves with stuff so we can go back to consuming. But today's a little different day. Today we're talking about the prospect of the beginnings of a new Cold War, the potential of a, in worst, horrible condition situation, a third world war. We are nowhere near prepared.
Yeah, no, we aren't. I mean, I will say from a broader perspective, I'm of course taking this out of the lens of American manufacturing and looking at this a little more broadly. I think a bold, decisive response with respect to sanctions sends the right message. I think Congress pressing for more is also the right message to make sure that Putin understands that he has no wiggle room here. There's no distance between the ruling class in the United States and our allies who care about this deeply as well. And as you set this up, one of those tools is our economic power and our resiliency. And in a crisis like this, you don't want to have your options limited because of supply chain weaknesses or a dependence on a foreign source for a material. And, you know, almost anything that requires an electric battery or an electric chip in it has rare earth minerals that in some cases were 100% dependent on foreign imports from China, in some cases from Russia too. So this is not an academic possibility, or we're not throwing this out here as a possible scenario. This is real. And so we want to make sure that we have all the capabilities either in the United States or have access to them through trusted partners. And right now, that's not where we're sitting. We need to get ourselves into a better place.
Yeah, no, I know you as someone who had studied the Cold War back during your college age. You know, you spent time working on the Hill. You're someone who has a little bit of background on this. Are we entering potentially? Is it hyperbolic to fear that this is a new Cold War, as I saw being thrown around, the potential of a new Cold War being thrown out, or are we already in one, if not with the Russians, with the Chinese?
Yeah. Well, I think, you know, there's, and I really do want to put politics aside here, because I think it's important for people to understand that no matter what you think of President Biden, he has probably given the relationship that we have with Russia and with Putin in particular more thought than any national leader that we have. And he really has. He's taken the time to do that, and he has been skeptical. Much like we've talked about this before, we were skeptical about China for the last 20 years. Not everybody was. More people are now. But Biden was skeptical about Putin 20 years ago, and other people were willing to give him a chance. And so I think he's had the right instincts all along. And the Cold War, I mean, you lived through it as a kid too. You know, the idea of mutual nuclear annihilation is terrifying, and I don't think that we're at that point, but I do think that we're at a point where there is more insecurity in Europe than there has been since any time, certainly since the end of the 1980s, and the threat of military conflict hasn't been greater from a ground perspective than during World War II. And so we have to take this very, very seriously about what the possible consequences are. And just to remind folks of what Senator Casey said at the top, unfortunately, we have a lot of business entanglements with Russia, with China, that make this a lot more difficult than it was post-World War II, when we called all of the shots. That's certainly not the situation today. So we need to make sure that our economic policy, our capability, our trade policy align with the kind of geopolitical independence and strength that we want to bring into a crisis like this.
No, I'm with you. But I was in your last segment. I was remembering the fall of the Berlin Wall, the end of communism, and this idea that we were now going to be able to benefit from this peace dividend. That we weren't going to have to spend all this money on Star Wars. We wouldn't have to spend all this money on the military-industrial complex. We were finally going to aspire to be a better civilization. And yet we're right back where I fear heading right back where we were. And the peace dividend, I keep asking, where'd it go? I mean, we have created the largest billionaire class in the history of civilization. And in Russia, the same thing.
That's where it went. Yeah, that's where it went.
The working classes of this country, the working class of Russia, the working class of Ukraine, we've all suffered. And at some point, I'm frustrated by the fact that one strong man can make this decision and tip over the entire apple cart.
Yeah. Yeah, it is I mean, we face, unfortunately, an era where we do have to confront dictators, authoritarians, and who are backed by not an insignificant amount of power, whether it's land forces in Eastern Europe or other sorts of cyber capabilities, or in the case of China, of an expansive and growing navy as well. And so this is what you would call a multipolar world now. And you referenced this. We were told that there would be the end of history. Francis Fukuyama wrote this book about how that all nations were going to trend towards democracy and towards openness. That needs to be rewritten today, because that certainly didn't happen. And I think a lot of that was based on the blind faith in a philosophy, and we got soft, as they say, and where we got especially soft was this idea that we could essentially help the rest of the world grow through a trade policy that outsourced our jobs, that weakened our own capabilities. But the return on that would be that everybody was allied with us and there wouldn't be problems like this. And so that's turned out to be a complete disaster. And we have to reel some of that back in.
So my question to you on this is because you've laid it out exactly the right way. This should be something that unifies the working class of this country to ask the question where that peace dividend went, where it all went wrong, because we had that strength and we gave away that manufacturing prowess. And I've brought this up before. You had that bridge in Trenton, New Jersey that said, Trenton makes, the world takes. We gave that away. People say we lost jobs. We didn't lose them. We know exactly where they are. They're not here. They're in places like China. We gave that away so that corporatists and the wealthy could have more, so we can have larger investor class, participation and more poverty. And I want to know when that anger is going to happen. But yet I'm seeing the response. We're down the middle on this, and I don't know how that happened. I mean, like you said, we grew up during the Cold War, the end of it at least, and there was a visceral reaction to a KGB agent, saying they're going to invade Ukraine, and yet we have a former president who is calling him savvy and a genius. We have a guy who wants to be president on Russian state TV saying how wonderful Putin is. Have we lost our minds?
Well, some of us have, but I think that Democrats seem largely unified on this, as they should be, and in fact want to push Biden to project as much economic, diplomatic strength and sanctions as we possibly can at this point in time to try to deter Putin from going further. And you have some Republicans saying the same thing as well, which is good. I mean, they're not all blindly following Trump here, because that is the wrong advice to somehow cheerlead this as being a brilliant strategic move. This is an illegal move, out and out aggression, which has to be countered. And you see Germany doing this, right? At the giving up an energy source that would and having to reconfigure its energy supply to try to deter Putin's aggression here. And so this is an all hands on deck occasion. And you can have your disagreements about some issues, but we need to be unified and determined with respect to this. And you're right. People should be asking the question, what the hell happened to all these promises that you said were going to come true, both with the end of the Cold War and with all of this stuff that we were promised? If we just gave corporations a tax break and we had free trade agreements, we'd somehow all be better off. That hadn't worked out particularly well. There's been a lot of backlash to it, and there's certainly been a lot of populist backlash to it. That populist backlash needs to be directed in a positive way. And so instead of scapegoating the wrong people, we need to put into place policies that will help us get us where we need to go.
Yep.
Good example of that was the jobs and infrastructure bill, right? That was it wasn't everything, but it was a step, and that's a dividend that will be returned to the American people. But we need to continue down that path and also project this kind of economic strength and sanctions, and have the backs of our allies and European security internationally.
You listen to the Rick Smith Show here with Scott Paul. Scott's the president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing. AmericanManufacturing.org is their website if you want to check out the work that they do. If you're just joining us, make sure you grab the podcast so you never miss a moment of our conversations. You got thoughts, questions, comments, I want to hear it. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com, or give us a call, 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. Scott, one of the things you brought up are trade deals. And when you think of trade, you think of China, and they're just basically just robbing us blind at and us giving it away too. They've come out and they've issued kind of a warning to Russia on the invasion, but I don't know that it's all that. I don't know that it's all that that harsh or hard or however you want to put that. I don't think China would jump in with Russia. I think China believes that they're the power of the next century. I don't think they want to get tied down in any of these kind of entanglements. They've got a path. They've got an agenda. And all this other stuff is just noise. I don't think they're going to try and stop it because it hurts us. But I don't think they're going to get involved. I'm curious your thoughts.
Well, I think you're right. And I think the only involvement would be indirect. I think that they view it as a useful triangulation, if you want to use that term. And I think that from that perspective, it's helpful. But I do think one thing that Chinese leaders are watching closely is what does the global response, what does the American response look like to this? Because as you know, China has its own expansionist ambitions and would like to bring the sovereign nation of Taiwan into the People's Republic of China, and wants to build territory literally in the South China Sea, and so they're going to be looking very carefully to see how what the European response to this is, what the American response is to this, and that will certainly inform the decision making on how they view Taiwan. And
right.
So again, that's yet another reason why a strong level of deterrence and sanctions are absolutely necessary at this point to avoid, to try to prevent this situation from eroding any further than it already has.
So if I'm hearing you right, because I had talked about this the other day, if I'm hearing you right, what you're saying is if we allow Ukraine to be taken over, as someone like J.D. Vance, the senatorial candidate in Ohio, basically said, screw them, we don't care. As we've heard from a lot on the right, screw Ukraine, it's not our problem. It's all Obama's fault. What you're saying, if I'm getting this right, is if we allow Ukraine to fall, the Chinese are going to go, hey, this is the new normal, and Taiwan's next, and then the dominoes start falling, and we end up right back in a weird kind of world.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a worst case scenario, but I do think that China has been much like Putin. Xi Jinping has been saber rattling, and obviously has done things with respect to Hong Kong, which I think a lot of people find abhorrent, and has made more threatening claims with respect to Taiwan. And so I do think that there's a lot of watching and observation to see what the resolve of the United States is, and our allies as well. And here's the thing about the people like J.D. Vance. I mean, I don't think they like China. They've made that pretty clear. They don't like China, and they purport to support Taiwan. I don't think you can really say you support Taiwan and its freedom, and at the same time let Putin walk into Ukraine. That's a hypocritical position, because that could and it's a dangerous one, because just setting aside the very grave circumstances for people in Eastern Europe, it is a backward march in terms of openness and territorial integrity and protecting the rights of people in Taiwan who feel very threatened right now by the belligerence of the Chinese Communist Party.
Is this a moment where we as a country, and look, you go back and you make thoughts about World War II, and my grandfather fought in World War II, and there's some of the things that I've read and heard and all of that. You never want to recreate that, but the one reason that they were able to succeed is that they had a manufacturing base. They were able to change automobile plants into tank plants. They were able to take all those machine shops and all those factories and turn them into wartime production. We don't have that capacity right now. And I know everyone says whatever the next war will be cyber wars. And yeah, maybe that is true, but we can't even make the stuff that we need to do that. Isn't this a moment of national awakening to go, hey, this is a call to national security. This is a call to rebuild our capability to defend ourselves, or is that too hyperbolic too soon?
It's not too hyperbolic. It makes a lot of sense, and there are people who try to think about this because, if you were to try to stand up and scale up, in a time of desperate need and conflict, a naval capacity, an airborne capacity, a tank capacity, you can't convert a McDonald's into an armament factory the way that we were able to convert, auto factories and other sorts of factories, steelmaking factories. The battleships were made at Bethlehem Steel, in Baltimore, Sparrows Point. The Kaiser set up a shipyard in Richmond, California, in the San Francisco Bay, to churn out battleships. And a lot of the car factories around Detroit were turned into factories that produced tanks and other sorts of equipment as well. Well, we don't have a lot of that. It doesn't exist anymore. I mean, there is some, but we're far, far away from that. And just the test case we had with the pandemic, Rick, showed that when it come to making something like cloth face masks or N95s, that we had difficulty scaling up as well, or critical medicines. Yeah. So the good news is that I do think this administration, this Congress, they are thinking about these issues a lot more than they ever had been. There has been some helpful legislation that both would, I think, make supply chains more resilient in the United States and think about these issues a little smartly, as well as the companies and their investments overseas, and saying, is it a good idea to invest in Russia or China right now if you're going to help their technological capabilities or military capabilities at the expense of ours? And that's something that we haven't done enough of. And I think there's a bipartisan interest in Congress, including Senator Casey, in doing that now.
Yeah, we've got a lot to do. Last question I've got for you. You brought up our trade policy. You've brought up, the fact that China is dominating us in manufacturing. And look, a lot of our inflationary problems are the fact that we're not getting stuff here, along with corporate greed and all of the stuff that goes along with that. Is there a way forward to undo some of this stuff? I mean, 20 years ago, we allowed China into the WTO. They've lied, cheated, and stolen every day they've been part of this. No one's ever held them accountable. Isn't it too late?
Yeah. Well, look, it's too late to undo the damage, right? We're never going to rewind that tape and say that didn't happen. But it's how we go from here that I think is the important thing. And there is a path forward, and we've shown it. Like, we can regrow manufacturing in the United States with intent, and you can see that with respect to electric batteries, with respect to other sorts of technologies that we want to have manufactured here, and we just need to see more of it. We need to see that at a bigger scale, and it is about having the right infrastructure, having the right workforce, having the right tax incentives, having the right research and development incentives, offsetting the cost of capital, holding other countries accountable for their trade, for their trade cheating. And if you do that, and the Biden team realizes they need new tools to do this, then you can make some progress, because we're an incredibly productive country. Yeah. We have great entrepreneurs. What we lack is an industrial strategy. If we had one, it'd be extraordinary. I think we can get there, but it's going to take a lot of hard work.
That it will. Scott, I appreciate the time. It's always great talking with you. I appreciate you sharing your expertise and your thoughts on this. Good stuff.
Of course, Rick. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Good stuff. Our good friend Scott Paul. He is the president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing. Make sure you check out their website at americanmanufacturing.org. We'll get links out on social media. This is one of those moments where, you just kind of go, we need something to wake us up. We need something that's going to push us in the direction to rebuild our base. I go back to, we were talking a second ago about how in Detroit we were building, tanks, and how in, airplanes and using those factories. I go back to my grandparents. My grandfather and my grandmother worked in the tank plant there in Cleveland, which today no longer a tank plant. It's an exposition center. We have home and garden shows there. We have, all kinds of, it's a display center. This was a place that was at the heart of our manufacturing prowess. It was at the heart of our ability to fight a global war. And what did we do? Well, we gave those machines away, we undid it, and we moved down the road. And why? So that we could have wealthier, rich people. We gave them tax breaks. We did it all. It was amazing what we were able to do. And we did it, well, so that we could have more rich people. And look, I don't think I'm being hyperbolic when I say we should, in this moment, working class people, and I don't, there's no division there, should be demanding an industrial policy that rebuilds our manufacturing base and gives us that strength. I don't know when walk silently and carry a big stick went unpopular. But having the manufacturing prowess we once had was that big stick. The fact that we could outproduce anyone with the ingenuity, the investment, and the skilled hands of American workers. Get away with all that. And why? Money, greed, profit. That's it. I mean, there's no other reason, no other rationale, no other thought. Oh, we were told a whole bunch of things. Oh, we're going to be much more peaceful society. It's going to be great. We're going to all, hold hands, and it's going to be wonderful. I remember the days after the fall of the wall, how incredible this future was going to be, the optimism, the excitement of a generation that we won this war, this Cold War against communism. And we kept being told, communism's horrible. It represses people. Only to find out that capitalism does the exact same thing. Poor people are poor. It doesn't matter what system you're under. Hungry people are hungry. It doesn't matter. And yet, here we are in this moment where you've got the Republican Party right now, a good majority of them, with the former guy who praised a dictator. Savvy, genius, largest peacekeeping force ever. We should do it on our southern border, he says. A guy who wants to be president as a Republican on state TV. I can't get that out of my head. And I think that's the biggest stab in the back of all. I get it from Trump, but Pompeo? That's a calculated decision. That's him going, you know what? I know what the base wants. The base loves Putin. They hate Biden that much. They hate Democrats that much. Scary times. If you missed any of the program, download the podcast, ricksmithshow.com. Quick break, right back after this. Stick around.
Scientists predict the changing climate could mean more extreme conditions. Now it's raising attention to how the weather will impact our economy.
Weather disasters impacted 1 in 10 homes in the U.S. last year. Biden Interior Department halts new oil and gas leases in legal fight over costs to climate. Plus,
there are homes to countless natural and cultural wonders that should be conserved for all to enjoy today, tomorrow, and for generations to come.
President Biden unveils historic $1 billion in funding for Great Lakes cleanup.
All of those historic stories and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
These are not only investments we're making in the Great Lakes, we're rebuilding America. We're going to invest in America and build a better America than we found.
Well, that shouldn't be hard. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, we're trying to rebuild a better America, but it is going to be costly at this rate, unfortunately.
Yes, it will. And that's because extreme weather disasters are extremely expensive. Extreme weather disasters affected 1 in every 10 homes in the U.S. last year and caused nearly $57 billion in property damage in a single year. That's according to a new report by property analytics firm CoreLogic. They found that in 2021 alone, 13 major disasters from hurricanes to tornadoes, wildfires, and winter storms impacted 15 million homes. And more than 40% of Americans live in a county that was struck by a climate-related disaster in the last year.
Well, we could do something about that, but then the oil and gas companies wouldn't get all of that free money.
Repeat extreme weather disasters are also raising the cost of homeowners insurance. The findings drive home the devastating toll of disasters that are becoming more common and more costly because of climate change. A different study has, for the first time, identified how changes in rainfall patterns induced by global warming dampen economic growth.
I see what you did there. Dampen economic growth. Very good.
A known consequence of man-made global warming has been the observed increase in extreme rainfall events worldwide. Researchers publishing in the journal Nature found that precipitation shocks, both deluges and droughts, significantly reduced productivity across multiple sectors and industries, from transportation to agriculture and service industries, and that in turn created a drag on an entire region's economic growth. They warn that current economic models probably don't realistically capture future costs associated specifically with climate changed rainfall and likely underestimate costs that climate change will impose on human society.
Climate change rainfall, kind of like those 10 inches of rain that they received in Rio, Brazil in 3 hours last week?
Exactly.
Oh.
In other news, the Biden Interior Department will indefinitely pause all federal oil and gas leases and permits in the wake of a Trump-appointed judge's ruling that blocked the federal government from using a key climate metric known as the social cost of carbon. The social cost of carbon is used to calculate the real costs of climate change, and it's used in a range of government decisions, from pollution regulations to permits for new oil, gas, or coal extraction.
But the Trump judge just tried to ignore that?
The Trump judge struck it down. The suit was brought by Republican state attorneys general seeking to increase fossil fuel extraction, but in an ironic twist, the consequence from the judge's ruling blocking that metric, at least initially, is that the administration will freeze all decisions about new federal oil and gas drilling and halt oil and gas lease sales and new permits on public lands indefinitely. Finally,
it's going to allow the most significant restoration of the Great Lakes in the history of the Great Lakes.
President Biden was in Lorain, Ohio late last week to unveil $1 billion in funding from the infrastructure law that will go toward cleanup and restoration of the Great Lakes. The bulk of the funding is targeted to restoring 25 sites across 6 Great Lakes states that the Environmental Protection Agency 30 years ago designated as severely degraded areas of concern that have been damaged by decades of industrial and agricultural pollution. The unprecedented restoration funding will address water quality, harmful algae blooms, invasive species, pollution, and habitat degradation, and will go to upgrading infrastructure, vital for shipping, transportation, outdoor recreation, and clean drinking water. Biden noted that each cleanup project will generate jobs, and that will ripple across the state's economies.
Every dollar we spend cleaning up the Great Lakes generates between $3 and $4 in economic benefit. That's a fact. And it's a really good investment. We're also showing that growing the economy and creating jobs can go hand in hand with protecting the environment, not decimating it, meeting the moment on climate change.
And it's all starting in Lorain?
Yep.
Sweet. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com.
Are
Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So today's a particularly interesting day for me, with what's going on in Ukraine and, the former guy coming out and throwing his support behind Putin, calling him a genius and savvy. I couldn't help but remember that Wisconsin Senator Ron Johnson, didn't he go to Russia on 4th of July not too long ago? And I now got to know why. That popped into my head. Was it for an endorsement? I don't know, which is why Wisconsin is on my radar as one of those states where I would love to see the Republicans lose another seat. And there's a guy that I really like because he did something that I've been talking about for, ever. He was out on a picket line supporting striking workers. He's out in front of worker issues. In fact, put out a campaign ad, which I thought was unique and incredible. The campaign ad that he ran was, hey, come to a rally supporting workers who want to make sure that the billions of dollars we're spending on new postal vehicles get made in his state like they should have been. I think that's really cool, and I think it's important that we have people like that, which is why I've asked Tom Nelson to come talk with us. Again, just incredible to me. Tom is currently the executive of Outagamie County. He is running for Senate there in Wisconsin. Tom, thanks for taking time for us.
Great to be on, and thanks for your support for the workers of Local 578 in Oshkosh. This is just fantastic. I told the fellows that I'm going on this program, going on because you retweeted the radio ad. They're just ecstatic. And, this is going to be a tough fight, but I think just having support coming not just from Wisconsin, but across the country, I cannot tell you, Rick, how much this means for the workers at Oshkosh.
Oh, it's important. Look, I've been saying for the longest time, the Democratic Party has lost their way. They used to be the party of labor. They used to be the party of the working class. They used to be the party of the people who took a shower when they got home at night. For some way, they lost their way. And when I saw your ad, when I saw your Twitter account, I go, this is a guy that we should be emulating. This is a guy we should be holding up because this is a guy who's actually walking the walk that he talks. And that's, again, something that in this moment, if you're a Democratic candidate, I don't care for dog catcher. If you haven't been on a picket line talking to a striking worker, you should cancel your campaign immediately. So in looking at this, because that issue that you put this ad out for, I think is one that really should anger people. Ron Johnson said your state already has enough jobs. How do you respond to that?
Well, here's the really frustrating thing. Ron Johnson's pretty crazy. We got in this race 16 months ago because I had a sneaking suspicion that this guy was going to run for re-election, even though he said he promised he was not going to do it. Surprise, surprise. But here's the really, really crushing thing, Rick, is I talk to people and this whole notion about how there's too many jobs, you would be surprised at how many people who are buying into that fiction, how we've been hearing, how it's been drilled into our heads. There's too many jobs. There's not enough workers. People want to work. Well, no. The issue is there aren't enough good paying jobs. And this is what it is. This is a $10 billion contract from the federal government to build the next fleet of Postal Service vehicles. Oshkosh Truck can do 100% electric vehicle or 0% electric vehicle. So this whole thing about pitting environmentalists and labor against each other because of the make of these vehicles, that's off the table. What is on the table is where they are going to make this. Oshkosh Truck got this contract for one reason only. Local 578. They have been there for over 100 years. They have established a track record. They have the workmanship. They have the craftsmanship. They have the reputation. They are the reason why Oshkosh Truck got that contract. The fact that they're sending it to union-busting South Carolina because there's too many jobs up here, I think is absolutely unforgivable. This community made Oshkosh. This is not Spartanburg truck. This is Oshkosh truck. And so we need to get this message out. And even though I've got to, marshal my resources to try to win this U.S. Senate race to beat Ron Johnson, this is a campaign within a campaign, because this is who I am. This is where I come from. I come from a blue-collar neighborhood in Little Chute. All the dads worked at paper mills, except for my dad. He was a Lutheran pastor. I like to say that he wore a white collar. But I learned very, very early the importance of serving your community, serving your neighbor, and finding out in time that there are a lot of people, like the working families on Carolyn Drive, the working families in Oshkosh, or Local 578, who work hard, play by the rules, pay their taxes, and can't seem to get ahead because there's a lot of money and there's a lot of power concentrated in just a few hands, including the CEO of Oshkosh Truck or Oshkosh Corp. And that is wrong. There are 100 U.S. Senate seats. 100 U.S. Senate seats. Those are 100 positions for people to get in to make a difference, to help the families on Carolyn Drive, to help the families in Oshkosh. That's what my service has been about. And so when there's something like this that comes up where I can stand up and I can elevate and I can raise this issue statewide, nationally, I will drop everything. I'll drop a U.S. Senate campaign to stand up for those workers because it's the right thing to do.
No, I saw you on the street with Starbucks workers in negative 13 degrees. I know you will. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. We're with Tom Nelson. Tom's a candidate for U.S. Senate in Wisconsin. He's the Outagamie County Executive currently. If you want to check out his website, nelsonforwi.com. We'll get links out on social media, how you can take a look at that and help out his campaign. If you're in the area, if you're in earshot of it, I'm sure you need volunteers. I'm sure you need donations, because as you pointed out, these campaigns are costly, and Ron Johnson is, well, loaded. I mean, he can self-fund this campaign, and he's got the ear of our nation's oligarchy. I don't think he's going to be concerned about keeping the lights on, so which is why I think people need to help folks like you.
Thank you, sir.
So, again, I go back to this and why I think it's so important to do what you are doing. What kind of response are you getting from that ad? And look, I know you're not able to put it everywhere like you'd want to, and we want you to, because I think it's incredible. What kind of response are you getting?
Well, first of all, I mean, any dollar I raise off of that ad on social media, on my Twitter or on Facebook, Nelson4WI, every dollar I raise off that is going back into the buy. And if I can raise enough money, it's going to go beyond Oshkosh. We'll bring it to Fond du Lac, to Appleton, to Green Bay. But we only got 3 or 4 days. So whatever we raise there, that's going on the air, because this is absolutely important. So what I hear on the campaign trail when I'm talking to people, it's exactly what you would expect. We're at a point in our country's history. There's this populist vein that's coursing through. There's the conservative and there's the progressive. Where this nation has been going because of Donald Trump is, appeals to our darker angels. And the reason why I believe people went with Donald Trump, including a lot of working men and women, is because the Democratic Party was not speaking to them in the terms that they should, because as you mentioned at the top of the hour, Rick, that we seem to have lost our way. If you look at what happened to Democrats in the 1990s with this neoliberalism, how we are looking at free trade as the solution, tax cuts for the rich, for corporations and giveaways, we lost our way. What we need to do is we need to invest in working families. And that means a $15 minimum wage. That means paid family medical leave. That means Medicare for all. That means getting rid of bad trade deals that have shipped Wisconsin jobs overseas. And that means passing the PRO Act. And you know what it also means too? I'm going to go a little further on this. It means repealing Taft-Hartley. Now, I will go to that point because that was the beginning of the downfall of the American labor movement. We peaked in 1946, 1947, 1 out of 3 private sector jobs was organized. Now we're down to what, 6 or 7%. The year that passed, that was the beginning. That's the reason why we have right to work laws. Yep. That's the insidious nature of what corporate America has done to us. So let's go back. Let's go back where it started, and let's get rid of that, and let's start over.
See, this is what a Democrat should sound like. I'm not pandering to you, but exactly what you said is what I've been saying every Democratic politician should be running on. We need to repeal Taft-Hartley, give workers their right to organize, to fight for better wages, hours, conditions, to lift up their communities. And as you mentioned earlier, People are working hard, they're playing by the rules, and they're not getting ahead. I grew up believing that if you did work hard, play by the rules, that you would get ahead, and the game's rigged. And I think so many people see this. The fact that we had a number of people voting for the former guy who sold them on the idea that we're going to bring back all this manufacturing, we're going to recreate the 1950s, it's going to be great again. And then did nothing to do anything about it. No infrastructure bill, no real policy or direction, but got people thinking in those terms. Is one of these moments where this is the issue, and Joe Biden is doing something about it, I believe, as we're talking about bringing manufacturing back. So let me ask you this: with the news today, now I did kind of a little chip shot at Ron Johnson about his visit to Russia on the 4th of July. I'm looking at this moment, and maybe you'll come with me, maybe you won't. I see this as a moment of national mobilization to rebuild our manufacturing base, because I don't think in the world that we're heading into, the world that my grandparents had, we had manufacturing prowess that were able to shift us over to war production. We're not that country anymore. And in fact, we can't even make the things we need to fight a cyber war. I'm curious, as a senator, what would you do, and how do you move us in a direction of reclaiming that silent power to where we could once again walk silently but have that big stick?
No, I'm glad you asked that question, because I think you're exactly right, that there is this realization, there is this understanding that even if you're not in a manufacturing heavy state like Pennsylvania, Ohio, or Wisconsin, okay, you are affected. You've been affected by the hollowing out of the manufacturing core of this country, because we have offshored key manufacturing components. I mean, if you look at where the supply chain broke, it was with semiconductors and microchips, and that's because production is isolated in one part of China. Look, America, we were the ones who invented the microchip, that invented the semiconductor. We need to reshore that production, because the problems we had during the pandemic, not being able to make ventilators, not being able to have enough saline solution bags, and go all the way to going into a grocery store, going down the toilet paper aisle, it was like Soviet Russia, 1973. Where's the paper products? Well, here we are. I'm calling to you live from the Paper Valley in Wisconsin. It's not called the Paper Valley for something. This is the highest concentrations of paper plants and paper mills in the world. And we have lost those jobs. We've lost those jobs because people like Ron Johnson are not standing up for American manufacturing, despite the fact that Ron Johnson made his millions in the paper and plastics industry. So even the self-touted manufacturer doesn't understand the value of American manufacturing. But you're right, Rick. This is the moment in time where everybody's dialed in, understand what happens when you have a broken supply chain, how it creates inflation, how it brings this country to its knees. We are the only industrialized country in the world that does not have an industrial strategy. Everyone else identifies commodities and different services and things that are a matter of national security, and they make investments in those industries, and they make sure the workers are well compensated and that they have family supporting jobs. We don't have that. And so then when we have a pandemic, we were totally unprepared for this. So this is the moment. This is the opportunity. This is like a perfect storm. You have this resurgence of the American labor movement. You have this collective understanding nationally, regardless if you're from a manufacturing state or not, that we have to reshore manufacturing. We have to do it ourselves, because you never know if there's going to be a truck blockade in Ottawa, and so we can't get stuff coming from the north. And you have Russia, who is destabilizing trade routes there. Look, I'm not saying we have to shut down shut down any type of, shut down our borders when it comes to production, but we have to be more self-sustaining. So now you need to have a U.S. Senator that comes in there, that understands this, that's going to put the nation's attention, the nation's resources, the power of this nation's law to redo American manufacturing. And at the core of manufacturing is the labor movement.
Well, I'm hearing I'm hearing your father in you. I'm sure he'd have been proud of that. Because preach it, brother. I'm right there with you. Because the reality is this is how we revive this country in a way that pulls us back together. And I've been saying jobs and manufacturing, and that's the way we come back to somewhere at least close to the same arena, if not on the same field, at least closer. But here's the thing, and if you're just joining us, I'm talking with Tom Nelson. Tom is the Outagamie County Executive. He's also running for U.S. Senate in Wisconsin. Make sure you check out his website, nelsonforwi.com. We'll get links out on social media. You can check that. If you're just joining us, a podcast, you don't want to miss this conversation. This is one of those ones that you're going to want to listen to over and over again. Because, again, this, in my view, how a Democrat should be running and sound. Now, we have a tax system problem that is insane. In fact, Rick Scott just came out with the Republican agenda. I don't know if you've seen the nice 31-page glossy brochure of the 11 points of insanity that of jingoism that he wants to throw out. But in the background, going to raise taxes on 100 million working class folks because, hey, that's what they do. I view our tax code as so badly screwed up and so slanted to, creating the largest wealth class in the history of known science, not known history. What do you do? Is there a way to make the tax code better, more effective, help working class folks get by, not punish too much at the top, but enough to say, look, we need investment. We need money. We need to help. What do you do on the tax front?
I think we have to go on offense. Which is we start closing these corporate tax loopholes. We pass the ultra wealthy tax that Liz Warren has been pushing. You need to start crafting tax policy just as you should craft trade policy, economic policy in this country. And that is simply from the perspective of the working man and woman, from the working families. That is the fundamental problem we have, even before you put pen to paper and write a law, tax law, a trade deal. Before you do that, you have to look at it from the vantage point of the worker. And we don't, because the politicians are bought up by Wall Street, the billionaires, the millionaires. And so they look at that piece of legislation, they look at that tax policy, they look at that trade deal from the perspective of their campaign benefactors, corporate America. No wonder the little guy, the paper mill worker on Carolyn Drive, or the auto worker in Oshkosh can't have a fair shake, who work hard, that pay their taxes but can't get ahead because the system is rigged. And the system is rigged because you have politicians that don't listen to working families, politicians, many of them who are millionaires themselves. Look, if I get elected to the U.S. Senate, I will be in the lonely minority of 30 of 1/3 that are not a millionaire. There's something fundamentally wrong. And then you can just kind of go down the rabbit hole from there. I mean, this goes to the whole issue about the stock trading ban. I mean, I'm not sure if it's just me here in little Appleton, Wisconsin, but if I go down College Avenue, I ask people about, members of Congress getting insider information, making millions of dollars off of stock trading. That's not right. And yet they can do that. And they can do it because they have done. And they've got away with it again and again. And so here I come up with this crazy idea. Hey, let's ban stock trading for members of Congress and their families. And you can't even get Democrats. You can't even get Democratic leaders on board. I mean, that is just a damning indictment on the state of this party. No wonder we lose blue collar workers to people like that former guy. It's all coming together now. But we got to go back to our roots. We know the answer. We know the solution. We got to get out of whatever we've been in for the last 30 or 40 years. We know how to do this. I believe that President Biden is on the right track. I believe because of people like Bernie Sanders, of whom I was a delegate in 2020, because of folks like that, they're moving the discussion and they're refocusing the attention, the economic issues, tax policy issues, trade issues onto the working families. They have done more than the Democratic Party has done in the last 40 years. Mm-hmm. That's what I tend to do in the U.S. Senate. I'm going to be to the progressive side as Sherrod Brown. I mean, this is going to be my core. This is how I'm going to act on legislation, write on legislation, and champion those issues. We do that, we're not going to have a Donald Trump problem anymore because we're going to be the real deal. Okay? Working Wisconsinites, Americans are going to come to the Democratic Party, come to people like Sherrod Brown and hopefully Tom Nelson, because we're going to show you this is how we make a positive impact in your lives. This is how we protect and grow good jobs here in Oshkosh, not somewhere in the South because they bust up unions. It's going to take time. And it's going to take more than just one election cycle, but it has to start someplace, and it's starting right now.
I was going to give you 2 minutes to give your elevator speech on why Tom Nelson. I think you just did it. I don't know where you can go anywhere else but there. Last question I got for you. What can folks do to help? How do folks help?
Let's start with this first. We haven't talked about this too. My campaign manager is yelling at me. So I wrote a book. 2 years ago about the work I did with the local steel workers to help save a paper mill. So this is just like Oshkosh Truck. Everybody gave up on this paper mill. PNC Bank pushed it into receivership. A scrap dealer from California bought it and was going to scrap it. And they said, Appleton Coated is gone. And so I said, no, we're going to fight back. I got together with the union. We prevailed on a local judge to make that scrap dealer give us a second chance. We put together a business model with labor and management, and local government. Okay. We brought back 3 machines in 2 months. We brought back 300 jobs. And by the third business quarter, those workers who were going to be unemployed were already getting their profit sharing checks. There aren't a lot of stories like this. But the Appleton Coated story is a special story. It is so special. I spent 2 years writing and researching this. It's called One Day Stronger, how one union local saved a mill, changing industry, what it means for American manufacturing. This is the blueprint. This is the starting point of how we revitalize manufacturing using the paper industry as a case point of what happened here in Outagamie County at the combined locks mill. If you're interested, go to my website, onedaystrongerbook.com. So you can check out the website, Rick, as you mentioned before, and then also the book site, onedaystrongerbook.com. And we'll send you a copy too, Rick, okay?
We will make sure that we get links out so folks can do that. Also, if folks want to help with the campaign, go to nelsonforwi.com, and I'm sure there are ways to help. But, Tom, it was great talking with you. I wish you the best. Please come back often. Love talking with you, man.
All right. Thanks again. Appreciate it.
Good stuff, Tom Nelson. And like I said, make sure you check out the website, nelsonforwi.com. Now, as I've been saying, and if you've listened to the program for a while, I've been saying, look, adopt a striker. Get out on the picket line, adopt a worker. Talk about these issues. The way he sounded, this should be required viewing and listening for every candidate. You drill down to the local. And rural communities need this more than anybody. To get into these rural communities and actually talk to the working people who are there. Because guess what? They're not all ideologically crazy. They mostly want the same things. Healthcare, decent job, some retirement security, good schools for their kids, opportunity. A responsive government that's going to meet the needs of their community. It's not that difficult. So the website, nelsonforwi.com, we'll get links out. That's simple. I love the fact that he brought up Taft-Hartley. I've been saying that for the longest time. I would love to see Taft-Hartley be repealed, because it should be. The original, and again, you've heard this before, but the original intent of the National Labor Relations Act was for government to encourage workers to collectively bargain. And as I've said for the longest time, and I think is accurate, it was a peace treaty between workers who were striking and shutting things down, and corporate America for industrial peace. I think we're in those moments. And like I said, what caught my attention with Tom was the ad that maybe we should be making those postal vehicles in Wisconsin using union labor as the president wanted, so that those jobs are good jobs, good union jobs. Maybe we should be moving in that direction. Make sure that people have a chance. That's all. Now, you've got Ron Johnson, we've got enough jobs. We've got enough jobs. Does any state have enough good jobs? The answer is no. Anyway, if you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com, make sure you check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Get the podcast there. Take the program anywhere you want to go, and go back and listen to Tom Nelson again. If you missed any of that, very important. Quick break, right back. Stick around. I'm Rick Smith, And this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1860. That was the day that the shoemakers of Lynn, Massachusetts walked out on strike. The shoemakers were very concerned over how technology was changing their work. Shoemaking had long been considered a skilled craft. Making shoes was typically done as piecework in the homes of the craftsmen. Often, other family members, including the women of the household, helped to make the shoes. But technological advances transformed the industry. The introduction of the Singer sewing machine in 1852 moved more shoemaking into factories. Many young women went to work stitching at these machines. What was once considered highly skilled work was now transforming into mass production. Then, to make matters worse, in 1857, a depression swept across the nation. Shoemakers saw their wages slashed. In response, on George Washington's birthday, the shoemakers went out on strike. They demanded an industry-wide standard wage. 20,000 workers joined the strike. 20,000 more supported the striking workers at protests and parades. 2 weeks into the conflict, women from the factories took to the streets, joining the strike. But the male shoemakers were weary of joining their cause to that of the women. Predictably, this division aided in causing the strike to falter and fade. Although the strike was not successful, it drew national attention to the plight of workers. During the conflict, presidential candidate Abraham Lincoln spoke out in support of the workers. He said, "I'm glad to see that a system of labor prevails in New England in which laborers can strike when they want to, where they are not obliged to labor whether you pay them or not. I like a system that lets a man quit when he wants to and wish it might prevail everywhere." Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Can antibiotic medicines, long hailed as miracle drugs, be too much of a good thing? Yes. 2 factors are at work here. First, bacteria, one of the earliest forms of life on Earth, are miracles in their own right, with a stunning ability to outsmart the antibiotic drugs through rapid evolution. Second is the rather dull inclination of us supposedly superior humans to overuse and misuse antibiotic medicines. Every time we take an antibiotic to kill some bad bacteria that is infecting our bodies, a few of the infectious germs are naturally resistant to the drug, so they survive, multiply, and become a colony of superbugs that antibiotics can't touch. Multiply this colony by the jillions of doses prescribed for everything from deadly staph infections to the common cold, and we get the, quote, antibiotic paradox. The more we use them, the less effective they become, for they're creating a spreading epidemic of immune superbugs. A big cause of this is the push by drug companies to get patients and doctors to reach for antibiotics as a cure-all. For example, millions of doses a year are prescribed for children and adults who have common colds, flu, sore throats, etc. Nearly all of these infections are caused by viruses, which cannot be cured with antibiotics. Taking an antibiotic for a cold is as useless as taking a heart drug for heartburn. The antibiotics will do nothing for your cold, but it will help establish drug-resistant superbugs in your body. That's not a smart trade-off. This is Jim Hightower saying, in fact, it's incomprehensibly stupid. Antibiotics are invaluable medicines we need for serious, life-threatening illnesses, but squandering them on sore throats has already brought us to the brink of superbugs that are resistant to everything. That's the nightmare of all nightmares.
Hightower's commentary is brought to you.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
You know, as I said earlier, I'm still in this place where I'm looking at the chaos merchants, the right-wing mouthpieces, all of the folks on the radical right who have been spewing garbage for years. Mission accomplished. I mean, finally, look, I've always said these folks are, as much as they wave the flag around and as much as they bash people for not saying the Pledge of Allegiance and all this jingoism and hyper patriotism, they don't give a rat's behind about this country or anything to do with it. And the fact that today you saw them cheerleading what happened over in Ukraine and attacking the president, I got to tell you, I don't know where we're heading, but it doesn't look good to me. And I look at the chaos merchants on the right, and I was hopeful for a moment that the Republicans were going to put people up that were so obscene and so out of the mainstream and so, well, insane that Republicans would come back to somewhere normal. But that doesn't appear to be the case. And here to share some thoughts on just how bad things are getting and how bad things have got, I have asked Austin Linfante to come talk with us. Austin is a multimedia editor and reporter over at Heartland Signal. Heartlandsignal.com is their website. They're our friends over at WCPT in Chicago, one of our radio affiliates. Austin, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks. What a day it's been, huh?
I got to tell you, for all of the antics that I've heard over the years, for all of the things that you go, man, it can't get any worse. They're never going to go this far. I understand the outrage. I understand you need to feed the masses that rage candy. I get it. I get the chaos merchants. But I got to tell you, I never thought they were going to side with Putin. Whatever happened to the party of Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall? How did we turn into Mr. Putin, so savvy and a genius? I don't know, man. How did we get here?
I have no idea either. This is something that's going to be in textbooks for sure. But yeah, I remember going into my morning agenda for Heartland Signal. It was okay, here's the stuff that's planned. Also, Russia, we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what people are going to say. I knew the stuff with Tucker Carlson. I thought that was going to be fringe at best. And then you have the former president come out and say, oh, Putin's pretty savvy and he's coming out as he's looking strong here. I don't understand it, but I think if anything to get a hit on Biden, I guess.
Is it that? Do you think it's that? Do you think it's just anything? It's a knee-jerk reaction to anything Biden does. Their hatred of him and the Democrats. That's where their focus is, and they don't really. I know I'm giving them way too much credit here, but do you think it's possible that it's just that their hatred for Democrats, for the other team, is so great that they've lost the big picture?
I don't think that's off base at all. I think that's pretty much what's going on here. Essentially, that especially with the GOP, have evolved to a place where giving Democrats any sort of attention is kind of it kind of hurts them. You go and see Mitch McConnell talking about, oh yeah, those stimulus checks sure were great, huh? I still hate them, but they sure were great, huh? They hate giving American people hundreds or thousands of dollars in one of the worst times in American history, and they'll just vote against it because of whoever's in office, or just to be a thorn in the side. Yeah,
but they didn't mind giving billions to their corporate buddies in the wealth class that own their party. That didn't seem to be a problem for them. But here's the thing, and this is where I'm starting to look at the party and go, maybe I'm looking at it wrong. Maybe the inmates have taken over the asylum. Maybe they are who they say they are. And the old Maya Angelou quote, if someone tells you who they are, believe them. And I look at some of the people who are running and are some of the front runners. And I look at this candidate for governor in Michigan. Holy moly. First it was, hey, rape survivors, if they shouldn't have abortions. They should have those kids because they're a blessing from God. Now this Garrett Soldano is back in the news again for more insanity. Please tell me more.
Yeah, so we got some audio of an event he did earlier this month in Flint, Michigan. It was a meet and greet Q&A sort of thing, and basically it starts off with, oh yeah, I'm unvaccinated, proudly unvaccinated because I have natural immunity, which again, natural immunity exists, but we don't know how well, and it's kind of a farce to say. For anyone to say that's permanent, but really he goes on and says this article took me a while because the audio is 6 minutes long. He says approximately a dozen things that would make headline news. For one, he says don't trust your doctor to be do not rely on your doctor for health to be healthy. You have to be healthy yourself. Kind of making this about personal responsibility. Keep in mind, we're probably going to hit 1 million plus dead in this country for this virus.
While not being vaccinated. I love that argument. Yeah. It's personal responsibility while not doing the one thing that you could be personally responsible for to not just protect yourself, but others. But we're going to talk about personal responsibility.
Yeah, no kidding. And not to mention, he downplays a lot of things. He downplays that vaccine. He says it's a therapeutic and not like an actual something that can help. And he downplays the virus itself. He calls it a cold. He generally says COVID's a cold. And oh gosh.
No, look, this is the right wing line though. I mean, this is what they keep telling themselves and what they're telling everyone else, Austin. This isn't news. And they believe this. And look, I have a relative who was on that line. Man, it's a cold, it's not a big deal, never won't affect me. Having the worst moment of his life right now. Miserable because this ain't a cold. This is something much worse than that. And fearing that, last hours are coming, now changing the tune a little bit. And this is what we see, interestingly enough, across the spectrum. There are only a handful of people, Austin, who went, you know what, I'm going to stick to my line, and even right to the grave. There have been a couple, but there aren't many.
Yeah, no. I can say myself, I've had COVID, and it's horrible. I still have lasting effects from it. I basically need an extra hour of sleep because of long COVID. It always especially hurts me to see that. Oh, and also one thing he says about the vaccine was that he kind of rails it because there's no long-term studies of 5, 10, 20 years. The 19 in COVID-19 stands for 2019, so I don't get where he's coming up. But he's second place in the gubernatorial race behind former Detroit police chief Jim Craig. So.
Yeah, and this is what I'm saying. I mean, this is who they are. I mean, they're telling us we should believe them, and it's really just it's crazy. But here's the interesting thing for me. You said there was a whole bunch of things in there that would make headline news, and that caught my attention because earlier today I was talking with somebody. I said, during the Trump presidency, there were 1,000 things that would have torpedoed anyone else's campaign, anyone else's presidency. I mean, every day was a dumpster fire. Every day was drinking from the fire hose of misinformation, of lies, of deception, of grift. It was all there. And yet there were so many that he was held accountable for none of them. So could that possibly be the MO here, the game plan? We just flood the zone so much that you can't keep up with all the insanity, and eventually it all becomes just a blur and a jumble that nobody ever gets their hands around.
That's a good question. I'm going to hope that things are different because at least with Donald Trump, he had decades to build this image of this millionaire, billionaire type deal of this successful businessman, quotes around successful. But Garrett Soldano is a chiropractor. Hopefully this will just get through that. At the end of the day, this is just some guy who calls the right to no moral conscience get out of jail free card for as an excuse to not get vaccinated. But you never know. These are the sort of people you see. This is the new norm for the GOP right now as far as the candidates running.
And that's the scary part of this. So you used to thought there were only a handful of lunatics and kooks off on the fringe. That fringe seems to now have infected the entire party. And as some of my friends at the Lincoln Project point out, the whole party is soulless and needs to go away. There needs to be a complete cleansing of Republicans in this country and start over somewhere near the sane line. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. We're here with Austin Linfante. Austin is one of the terrific reporters, and he is the multimedia editor over at Heartland Signal, heartlandsignal.com, the website. You can check out the work they do there. Also, WCPT, one of our affiliates, that's their baby. Make sure you tune in there, and thanks for all of our listeners there in Chicago. Now, I want to get to this other thing, because this Christy Gnome, or Crazy Gnome, this whole fetish that the right wing has with other people's sex lives. It starts. It's everybody. They just pick something to focus on for this bit of time, and as I say, eventually they're going to come for boring people too. It's just a matter of, for some reason, they have this fetish where they're now going after. I guess there was a report that there were 90% of people who are LGBT are diagnosed with anxiety and depression, and well, I guess she couldn't figure it out, could she?
No, she couldn't. Like the survey said that 9% of LGBT people in South Dakota had anxiety or depression, and a reporter asked her that at a weekly press conference, and she's like, "Oh, I don't know what that's about. We should get to the bottom of this." She signed the first anti-trans bill of 2022, which is that kids who identify as girls or were born men or born identify as men can't play on girls' teams. And not only did she sign into law, she authored it. And not only did she author it, she put out national ads saying, "Look how great the state is for this law that I signed." So like she's parading around something that's entirely based on hate and entirely based on just trying to control the lives of children who are just trying to feel accepted and are trying to like understand where they're at. It's just unbelievable.
But again, it's who these folks are. And look, we can have an argument about, we can have a discussion about some of these topics, but the kind of mean-spiritedness, the kind of hatred that these people are ginning up, I mean, it's I guess it's predictable, isn't it? I mean, I shouldn't be shocked. I shouldn't be surprised. This is who they've been for a very long time.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And in fact, there's something going on right now as we speak, happening in the Tennessee House Committee. And basically, it allows, gives protection to like public school teachers to like purposely misgender kids from like civil liability. Basically say like I can call you, Rick Smith, a girl, and if I like, let's pretend you're a student, I'm a teacher, and I can basically just keep on bullying you and get away with it. I don't know, but.
Yeah. No, there's a bigger problem there than saying there should be a law that does basic humanity and dignity would, because you put it there should never be an adult teacher, bullying a child in a school. I don't care what it's over, if it's that or it's something else. And this is where parents, if it were my kid, let's not talk about what I would do, because it would not end well for me or anyone else. But this is one of those moments where, why would a teacher do this to another person? I don't care what the topic is. Especially in front of other, it just shows the kind of inhumanity and the kind of mean-spiritedness that anyone who would identify with Kristi Noem or any of these folks at this moment have in their soul. So I again, not surprised.
Yeah, I don't know what sort of place in life you have to be to go get into a legislature and write a bill saying like, hey, bullying kids as teachers is legal now. And this isn't just like the fringes. These are people like the guy who wrote the two people who wrote this bill. One's the treasurer of the state party. The other one is the chairman of like the state Senate Judiciary Committee. Like this is essentially what the GOP is now. Like this is them. This is not the fringe.
No, this is exactly my point. And thank you for making that. These people have made a political calculus. Because understand, I view politicians as soulless. Politicians are merely vessels to move an agenda. They're going to go any direction that they can go to make sure that they get votes. I believe that to my core. These are folks who they're putting their finger to the wind and going, hey, and for us to get through the primaries and get into the general, we've got to go full on crazy, because that's who the rabid base is right now. So this is how this stuff pops up. And look, it's just not South Dakota. Tennessee's doing crazy stuff. Florida with their Don't Say Gay bill, which is this is the most bizarre thing. The principals of the school, I guess, now have to call and tell parents if their children come out as anything other than straight. Really?
Yeah. No, like it's cruelty, and it's been said a million times. The cruelty is the point. They just want to put you under the boot and kind of squash you and like rub you into the cement, and because they can.
Yeah, no, that's true. It's because there's the point. It's because they can. Now, the Tennessee bill, you've said that this is the one that's evidently moving through one of the subcommittees. You've said that this is even more crazy, more outlandish, worse than even the Florida bill. Why is this one different?
So at least with the Florida bill, and trust me, the Florida bill's very bad, very, very bad. But you're starting to see like the variations of the Florida bill pop up in other states, including a bunch of Midwest states. I believe it was I think it's either Missouri or Minnesota that has it. This one I've been working at Heartland Center for about 8 months, even before it launched. I've never seen anyone just flat out say, "Hey, we're gonna legalize bullying," just because we don't like this certain group of people. I haven't seen this in any other legislature, and I don't know what place in life you have to be to do this, but
yeah, we're on that same page. So for the sane and rational, this is where I keep coming back to. You have to point out this insanity. You have to point out just how extreme this is, because I think even when I talk to even Trump supporters and rabid Republicans individually about these issues, they're nowhere near this extreme. And what happens is, and this is where the right-wing chaos merchants and the outrage candy folks in right-wing radio keep feeding these people these boogeymen. You know, there's someone in the bathroom with your daughter who's dressed like a woman, and it happens everywhere except in your neighborhood that you've never seen and it's never happened. But we know of somewhere where it might be. They create these constructs, these boogeymen that everyone now is afraid of. Where from the beginning of time, we were never afraid of this stuff. We just, lived our lives. You know, my grandfather always said, "Don't worry about me, worry about yourself." When did we become a society obsessed with everybody else? That's where I think I'm struggling the most. I'm of the mindset, don't worry about me, worry about yourself, and we'll be okay. And this should be one of those moments.
Yeah, that should be one of like the basics virtues of humanity, of just like not worrying about what goes on, like how someone identifies, or like what goes on in someone else's bedroom. Just kind of essentially staying in your lane. But Republicans, they need a wedge issue, and if it's gonna be trying to scare people into thinking that transgender people are gonna take over the world and molest everyone's kids, they'll go about it. Evidence and science, and like the fact that trans people have been around since the existence of humanity. Be damned.
No, and this use of religion as the browbeating. Religion for me was always something to raise you up, to aspire to be a better person, to care about your fellow man. It was about feeding the hungry and caring for the poor, and clothing the naked and taking care of the elderly, and and all of this stuff. It was about that. I grew up, it was about, social justice, and it was about peace. Now it's all about, hooray for me and screw the next guy, and let's browbeat everyone we can. And I look at Minnesota. You got this other guy running, another gubernatorial candidate, who sent his own kid to that insane conversion therapy that everybody agrees doesn't work and just harms children. But, hey, got to get there somehow, man.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, it's a good point. And this is Paul Gazelka, the guy you're talking about. Like this is something I believe you're getting into. This, like he wrote a book in 2003, and my colleague Zach Honey, who we had on last week, did a really good article on this, where he goes into certain sections and essentially just spouts all of his beliefs. And one of the more egregious ones is women have to be submissive. And yes, he does use the word submissive. To their husbands, or they will, quote, reap what they sow. And this is a guy who lives in this century.
Yeah. I don't even want to know what that means. I actually don't want to go between his ears and find out what he believes that means. I just hope the good people of Minnesota turn him away at the polls, and in a resounding fashion. Because I got to hope at some point the pendulum swings back to somewhere near the sane line, and we go, you know what? We don't want to do this anymore. We want to go back to somewhere between the curbs. Just my thought. But Austin, I appreciate the time. Great work you guys do there at Heartland Signal. I'll keep it up, and I look forward to talking to you again real soon.
Thank you so much. Have a good one.
Good stuff, Austin Linfante. Again, he is the multimedia editor there and reporter at Heartland Signal. HeartlandSignal.com is their website. We'll get links out on social media how you can check that out and follow the incredible work they do there. No, look, this is where I've been for a while. I mean, these people are literally insane. And at some point you go, maybe we figure out how to rein this whole thing back in a little bit. Maybe on some level we go, it's too much. It's too far. Look, you can have some honest discussions about whether children born as male, becoming female, competing in individual sports against other females is right or wrong, and they're having that debate in the NCAA right now with the University of Penn team. I understand that discussion, but to then go and attack those kids, it's where I'm struggling. And I've said for the longest time, I wish we could get back to the place where I grew up. And my son and I talk about this all the time because, I grew up in a time where it didn't matter who you were. Or maybe it was just the place that I lived in. It didn't matter, what ethnicity you had. It didn't matter what the color of your skin was where I grew up because I was the white kid in the neighborhood. It didn't matter because all of us coexisted. Now, it mattered because you had the black kid, you had the Polish kid, you had the Jewish kid, you go down the line, the fat kid, the skinny kid, the dumb kid, the ugly kid. You had all of those, and it didn't matter. And you were identified as such. Our differences were who we were, but nobody seemed to get offended. And yeah, you told the Polish joke to the Polish kid and the Jewish kid, and they laughed. And then they would come back with a joke at you, and it wasn't what defined us. It wasn't what kept us apart. But then again, we used to beat the snot out of each other, and then 5 minutes later we're playing ball again. It was a different culture. It was a different idea. And yes, there were repressed people and there were all of that stuff. My view is if we could get to a place where we're no longer focused on that, on beating each other up over that, and just recognizing that we're different and moving forward together. As a labor guy, and this is where I come back to all the time, as a working class labor guy, the one thing that I understand more than anything is that our divisions have kept us apart. Our divisions have kept us down. And the wealth class is very happy to use those divisions to keep us pitted against each other, to keep us at each other's throats, to keep us pointing our fingers at each other and spewing garbage and talking points and platitudes and just hating on each other in the most vile and ugly ways. And they're happy to introduce these things. They're happy to create these environments for that hatred and that division to fester. They love that. Why? Because as long as we're eating each other, as long as we're beating each other up, as long as we're attacking each other's kids, as long as we're just ripping ourselves to shreds, you know who we're not going after? You know it. Them. The people who cause these problems. The folks who put us in this situation. As I said at the beginning, when I was a kid, when the Berlin Wall fell, I was out of high school, I was out of college. There was hope. We were going to have a peace dividend. It was going to be great. We were going to take all the money we wasted on Star Wars and the Cold War, and we were going to invest in humanity. We were going to make the world a better place. And what did we do? We took that peace dividend. We took that moment and we handed it to the wealth class. We said, yeah, we'd like to do that education stuff. Yeah, we'd like to do that healthcare stuff. Yeah, we'd like to invest in roads and bridges and schools and all that stuff. Yeah, man, yeah, we'd like to. But we need tax cuts for the very wealthy. Corporate America needs tax cuts. We need bad trade deals. Look, everybody has to blame in this. The working class gets screwed no matter who's in charge. And I look at this situation with Ukraine. The working class in Ukraine is going to get screwed. The working class in Russia is going to get screwed. And the working class in America is going to get screwed. It is what's going to happen. But we've been so easily divided and pitted against each other that we don't recognize their struggle either. We're going to put massive sanctions on Russia, and that's already happened. That's begun to happen. Right now, they're going after the oligarchs and some of that stuff. But eventually, understand, as I said at the beginning, the oligarchs, they never suffer enough. Because suffering doesn't trickle, it steamrolls downhill. And where does it end up? It ends up on the back of working people. It ends up on the back of the poor and struggling families. And like it or not, unless you are one of the in crowd, you're going to suffer too. Immediately, we're going to start seeing higher gas prices because of this, regardless. It's going to happen. Because, our oil companies see a good opportunity. They took advantage of the pandemic. They've jacked up prices. And this is going to be another great reason. Because, there's a limited supply. It's a great excuse. It's a great excuse to fleece the working class. And our elite, our kleptocracy, our oligarchs and the kleptocrats that they are, they understand this better than anyone. And then you start thinking about, how many people are going to end up losing their homes? How many people are going to lose their livelihood? How many people are going to lose everything they've worked for? Only so somebody can come in and buy it up for pennies on the dollar. Good old-fashioned disaster capitalism. We never talk about that stuff, man. We never talk about in any real detail how we solve the problems of the working class. And then, like I said, I understand this. And this is why I say, look, we've got to put down our guards on some of these issues. We got to put down our guards and we've got to start coming together on what really matters. And that is the humanity, our humanity, yours, mine, theirs. Until we do, this kind of stuff is going to continue. We're going to continue to eat each other. It just seems that simple. And I go back to our history. History has shown us this time and time again. The wealthy always seem to come out smelling like roses. Roses that you and I picked for them. And until we stop and until we wake up, we're going to continue. Which is why I'm hoping every day that as we see more workers deciding to come out and organize and unionize, that maybe that voice picks up, maybe that starts to resonate and people start to come together. Because unity, solidarity, togetherness, that's how we change things. It doesn't get any more difficult than that in my view. It just doesn't get any more difficult. Anyway, if you missed any of today's program, make sure you download the podcast. Yes, the podcast. Take it with you wherever you go. Have it at all times. You don't have to be here during our regular hours. That's why we do it. For your convenience, you download that at any of your podcast hosting sites, from iTunes to iPhone, or from iTunes to iHeart to Podbean to Stitcher and everywhere in between. Make sure you grab that. Also, if you got a thought, question, comment, love to hear it. You can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk. Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
As I said earlier, I'm still in this place where I'm looking at the chaos merchants, the right-wing mouthpieces, all of the folks on the radical right who have been spewing garbage for years. Mission accomplished. I mean, finally, we've been Look, I've always said these folks are, as much as they wave the flag around and as much as they bash people for not saying the Pledge of Allegiance and all this jingoism and hyper patriotism, they don't give a rat's behind about this country or anything to do with it. And the fact that today you saw them cheerleading what happened over in Ukraine and attacking the president, I got to tell you, I don't know where we're heading, but it doesn't look good to me. And I look at the chaos merchants on the right, and I was hopeful for a moment that the Republicans were going to put people up that were so obscene and so out of the mainstream and so, well, insane that Republicans would come back to somewhere normal. But that doesn't appear to be the case. And here to share some thoughts on just how bad things are getting and how bad things have got, I have asked Austin Linfante to come talk with us.